We're going to start off with Ms. Anthea Mchtyre, who is the president of SME Connect Europe and was a member of the European Parliament from SME Connect Britain, and who was a member of the European Parliament from 2009 to 2020. And then we are going to have an open discussion with Dr. Christoph Leitl, the president of Eurochambers and author of the book China am Ziel, Europa am Ende, which loosely translates as has China reached its goal, has Europe reached its end?
And Global Chamber Platform, don't forget.
And Global Chamber Platform, thank you very much. We are also joined by Mr. Georgios Kyrtsos, a current member of the European Parliament, who is also a member of the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs and a board member of SME Europe. Welcome.
Okay, hello.
We are also joined by Mr. Zhu Wei, an entrepreneur and CEO and founder of XNote, a Shanghai-based incubation hub for businesses. Welcome. Last but not least, we are also joined by Mr. Jeal, the author of the book Made It in China, former banker and co-founder of Blockchain Century Limited. Welcome. Without any further ado, Anthea, would you like to start with your opening?
Thank you, Thomas. Well, I would like to very much welcome everyone to this seminar. I think for the benefit particularly of our UK participants, it's worth my setting the scene a little bit. SME Connect was established in 2017, and it's as a network of SMEs and supporters of SMEs, and it seeks to maximize the impact of SMEs at the EU level. And SME Connect UK was established last year, and I am delighted and honoured to be its president. And really, I think that we have a lot to offer UK SMEs, a conduit really for SMEs to engage with Brussels, to understand the institutions, to network with each other, talk to other businesses and discover opportunities. And in a post-Brexit world, that becomes very important. And I hope that many UK companies will join us at SME Connect and benefit from the connections that we have past, present and future with EU and the companies right across the EU. So today, I think it's very interesting that we are looking particularly at the economic future of Europe and China. Certainly China economic relations and trade is hugely important to the UK and indeed to the EU. It's well known that the EU imports most of its imports, top of the list is China, and it's also second for exports. And for the UK, we export and import enormous amounts to China. I think also in the situation we are in of COVID, it's quite noticeable that COVID has really decimated global supply chains. And so for the UK and the EU, the idea of reshoring is one that's come to the fore. All my time as an MEP, I was very keen on supporting small businesses, and I have noticed huge amounts of opportunity from reshoring jobs that went to both China and India. Obviously, China is our topic today. But thanks to rising labour costs and the need for shorter lead times in the modern manufacturing processes and more automation, a number of firms were looking closer to home. And that gave SMEs a great deal of opportunity. But flexibility, diversity of supply is hugely important. And I think that that's where there is a challenge for China in the competitive world, to keep its lead in particularly electronics and electrical goods coming to the UK. So looking at the post-COVID world is very important. The other thing that I have to mention is, I think, the concern of what I would call liberal democracies, the UK in particular, of the lack of human rights in other countries. And indeed in the UK, there was a move to ensure that trade deals with other countries could be vetoed based on, in fact, genocide. And when we are today actually at Holocaust Memorial Day, it's something that cannot be overlooked. And it's not just the Holocaust of the Jews in Nazi Germany, but it's Holocaust all over the world. And there is great concern about the Uyghur people in China. And there is a very important discussion to be had at a political level about the extent to which human rights should impinge on trade deals. So that is the background, I think, for today's discussion. I'm very much looking forward to it. And I think at this point, I'll hand over to Thomas.
Anthea, thank you very, very much for those very catching opening words. Dr. Leitl, Christoph, you recently published a book with a very catching title. How do you see the current relationship between Europe and China?
First of all, a cordially welcome to our UK friends. I always was telling, particularly to the young people, if a family is leaving the common house, it will remain part of the family. And therefore, we have to work on that. And we as economic representatives have to build bridges. The political show is over. Now the pragmatic work is beginning. And we as Eurochamber will do something, and therefore I'm so appreciating that SME is building a bridge between UK and the rest of the European family. And we will work on that, and I will in the next day give a letter to the British Chamber of Commerce and Industry to come back to our European Chamber family, because we have now to make the pragmatic work so that our companies, which are affected by barriers now, customs, bureaucracy, and we have to work on that to make it easier. And I mentioned young people. I'm really violated that UK is not willing to take part in the Erasmus Plus program. Exchange young people, not only students, but also professional people. And I think we should work on that. That was a failure, and we should correct it. That's number one. Number two, we have three major economic factors in our world: United States, China, and European Union. And the exchange of goods and services are near to balance for all sides, not in bilateral respect, but in total exchange. And that means that we have a common responsibility, not only for economic sector, also for the environmental sector, also for digital changing sector, also for better skills and better sharing our worldwide labor force. We could and we should work together. And that's the crucial point I want to mention today. The crucial point. Have I a rest of 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The crucial point is, how do we deal with each other? Joe Biden is a very reasonable man, but will he try to collect the Western part against China? Or could we as Europeans try to say, let's make, and that's a new idea for the first time I'm expressing it, a G3. G3, that are these three mentioned countries, United States, China, and European Union, to work on several things which are affecting our economy, but not only the economy, the financial speculation, fair taxation, fair environmental protection, and. We have to do so a lot. And we have to be responsible also to other continents, Latin America, Africa, and. And that's what I want to say. Give G3 a chance. Therefore, we could contribute to more stability, to more peace, to more prosperity, and deliver for young people new forms of life perspectives. And that's what we should, as SME representatives, should be in favor for. Italy now has a G20 chair, but Italy is quarreling internal. It's a pity. Therefore, we, as business representation, should raise our voice and to tell in clear words what we want, what we need, and what's perhaps a progress in the world of turbulences. Thank you very much.
Very, very good ideas here, Christoph. Thank you. Mr. Kyrtsos, Georgios, as a member of the European Parliament and being a member of the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs, what is your viewpoint?
Thank you very much. Well, I am also a member of the Security and Defense Subcommittee, so I have a wider perspective, not just economic, but as well as political. I would like to make briefly 7 basic political points. The first point is that we discuss the post-COVID era, but we have to understand that we are further away, we as Europeans are further away than China from the post-COVID era. For instance, there are 100 to 150 new COVID cases every day in China, and not any deaths, I think 1 or 2 during the past 6 months. Whereas in the European Union, we face a major problem. So, as I state in a book that I published in Greek, unfortunately, in the labyrinth of the pandemic, this is the title. Labyrinth is a Greek word, pandemic is another Greek word. We have to face, let's say, deal first with the pandemic so that we'll be able to improve our economic performance. Then the second point I would like to make is that the Chinese approach to the pandemic is different, tougher and more effective than the European approach. They put the emphasis on strict lockdowns, massive testing free of charge, and digital control of social contacts of those that have the COVID-19. So these measures are considered unacceptable in social and political terms in the European Union, but we have to do something more than the present routine. Maybe if we do not want to follow the Chinese path, we should use the good examples of New Zealand, Australia, South Korea, Taiwan. As a result of what I just described, and this is the third point, China is the only major economy that develops during the pandemic. In 2020, the Chinese GDP will increase by 2.3%. And according to the IMF, China's economy could expand by 8% in 2021. Germany, which is the most powerful, has the most powerful and successful economy in the European Union, will have a fall of GDP in the range of 5% in 2020. And France, Italy, Spain, and of course, Greece, they have to deal with a fall of GDP in the range of 10% in 2020. And nobody knows exactly what's going to happen in 2021. In addition, Chinese exports are increasing. The Chinese trade surplus is increasing. Foreign direct investment in China increased in 2020, and China surpassed the USA in terms of foreign direct investment. Industrial production is increasing in a very dynamic way on an annual basis. And the Chinese industry has been proven very flexible in the sense that it dominates the sectors that developed as a response to the pandemic: pharmaceuticals, necessary hospital equipment, even masks. The fourth point is that the pandemic acted as a catalyst in the development of the digital economy. And the Chinese are doing very well in the digital economy. There are two digital superpowers, the USA and China, and the European Union is in the third position, but far away. Take example, the Zoom flourished, and it's controlled by Chinese interests. Take the example of Jack Ma, who is the equivalent of Bezos and Amazon. He's very successful and very powerful, and he even had some problems with the Chinese government because he pushes forward the digital payment system, and even he wants to create some form of digital currency. The Chinese are doing very well in the digital sector, and the Europeans are falling behind the Americans and the Chinese as well. The fifth point that I would like to make is that at the beginning, some analysts thought that the pandemic was the Chernobyl moment of the Chinese political system, that due to the pandemic, the legitimacy of the political system, the government, would be questioned. The reverse happened because the Chinese were successful in dealing with the pandemic. And according to international opinion polls, 95% of the Chinese people are very satisfied with the way that their government dealt with the pandemic, whereas the respective percentages in Western countries range from 40 to 60%. And through the crisis in the United States of America, the pandemic crisis and the electoral crisis due to Trump, we realized that the post-pandemic world will be have two protagonists: the United States with a lot of internal problems, and China, which is developing very dynamic. And according to the IMF, the Chinese economy will surpass in volume the American economy in 2028. Of course, the Chinese have 4 times the population of the United States of America, so the Americans have a better living standard. The 6th point is that Trump tried to deal on his own with the influence of China, because, of course, China is a strategic rival and a major collaborator. It has two different conflicting characteristics as far as we are concerned. We understand that they are a strategic rival of the European Union and the West, if there exists, if the West still exists, we'll find out with President Biden. But they are very important in economic and political terms, and we have to develop our collaboration. So we shouldn't, the 6th point I would like to make is that we shouldn't make the same mistake with Trump on the European side. We have to deal with China in a constructive way, but in coordination with the USA, because otherwise you won't be able to influence events, even as far as gas emissions are concerned. I was reading the other day that the European Union, which has this very good green transition policy, is responsible of just 8% of the world gas emissions that affect climate. So our specific weight is going down due to Brexit as well, and to have to do something about it. Finally, the final point, you should be relieved I'm finishing. I think that we need big money and on the European scale, we have to understand that, and extensive support for the European economy and SMEs, of course, because we make two mistakes in that respect. We are insisting in being thrifty because you have in mind that, let's say, funds will move from the more developed countries to the less developed countries in the European Union. But this is something of the past. Now, our objective should be completely different. The first thing we have to do is create European champions, even if that has to do with trains, the digital economy. We need European champions because the scale of the Chinese and the American economy is huge. We cannot compete if we don't have European champions. And our support to the European economy should not be on the basis of what the European support used to be in the past, but should be defined by comparing the support that the American economy gets from its government and the Chinese economy gets from its government. So we need big objectives and big money on a European scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgios. Mr. Jeal, Graham, you have built successfully businesses in China and in Europe. Where would you say the economic opportunities lie in the relationship between Europe and China?
Well, thank you, Tom. In terms of opportunities, I will come on to opportunities, but I think this is an interesting and timely discussion about our relationship with China. And I think it's important to just remind ourselves that business is done at a bilateral grassroots level between small businesses, medium businesses, international conglomerates, but it's not necessarily done in Brussels, London, Beijing. It's done at a grassroots level. And whilst, of course, there are challenges in our relationship, there are challenges and disagreements in our values, I think the message from business has to be we can't influence each other without engagement. We have to engage at a bilateral grassroots level to attempt to influence the policies of governments and to change the values of each other's societies. And I think that the way we have to do that is we have to be mindful of the fact that when we do engage, with each other. We have to be open-minded and open-hearted. We have to listen and learn. There are lots of things we can learn from the Chinese, as well as they will learn from our great societies, the great societies of Europe, the great countries of Europe. Moving on to the opportunities. I mean, China's economy is changing, it's developing, it's moving forward. The opportunities are immense. I'll obviously come on to the biggest opportunities, but some of those that are less thought about in Europe. Things like blockchain. The Chinese are pioneers in many blockchain areas. Blockchain is an area where the Chinese are looking to cooperate internationally as well as develop their own domestic standards. I'm thinking of projects like Origin Trail and VChain. These are projects where the Chinese authorities are reaching out for cooperation in a kind of a two-way bilateral learning method, as well as developing their own standards, such as through the blockchain service network. And these are things that perhaps Europeans can learn from the Chinese at the way they're approaching this space. The digital yuan related to blockchain will make China will be the first country in the world to launch its own digital currency, not strictly on the blockchain, but that will make China a pioneer in financial services. This is a petri dish of a modern industry that we can learn from, and that the Chinese are looking to. There'll be mistakes along the way, but there'll be lessons that we can learn and implement in our own societies. Going on through perhaps a familiar list, biotech. There's lots of biotech cooperation between Europe and China at a bilateral level. The Made in China 2025 initiative, that's an attempt to change the Chinese economy to the industries of the 21st century. Robotics, artificial intelligence. The Chinese have got some great companies in these spaces, but they need our great companies as well. And so this bilateral cooperation will help influence each other. Logistics, the Chinese frankly have altered the terms of global trade by their totally comprehensive mastery of logistics. There's lots of things that we can learn from the way that their logistics industries have developed. Environmental transition economy, that was already mentioned earlier on. The environmental industries and the green lobby is very big in China. Obviously, they've got a lot of work to do on that. We've got some great companies in this space. We can work with them in this space. The smart city initiatives. In the reality, China has got a lot of very large cities. They can pioneer smart city initiatives in a way that, frankly, they're better placed to do than Europe because they have more bigger cities. Now, I think that there's two-way learning that can be done there, and that's a particular place where we can work together and influence their values. Obviously, the biggest opportunity is, it was already mentioned earlier, the bilateral trade between China and Europe. The reality is, much of that is going in one direction. The biggest opportunity is for European companies to sell to the emergent middle classes in China. We need to get selling to these people, and the Chinese want to buy European. They want to buy British. They want to buy European, but we need to engage to do that. So, I mean, that's what I see as the opportunities. And as I say, just to emphasize that we've got to approach China as a partner. It's a partner that we have challenges and problems with, and we'll always have challenges and problems. Dare I say it, Britain and Europe will have challenges and problems going forward. They'll be on a different scale, but the only way we can hope to influence them and promote our values would be for our businesses on a grassroots bilateral level to engage with the businesses on a grassroots bilateral level in China. And that's really what I've got to say on that, Tom.
Wonderful, Graham. Thank you. Mr. Mchtyre, you are our man on the ground in Shanghai. What is your view of the relationship from the Chinese perspective?
Okay, thank you very much, Graham. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so to echo what Graham just said, I mean, I also share the same statement. I think engagement is definitely more beneficial than not to engage with the other party. And I will try to perhaps to analyze my version of the engagement in the three different areas: in economic relationship, in social relationship, plus potentially political relationship. So let me come to the first part of economic relationship first. So my company, which is called Xnode, what my company does here in Shanghai is we actually help 30 plus the biggest European companies, including AstraZeneca, Philips, Roche, Merck Pharmaceutical. These are some of the largest European names, do innovation here in Shanghai, in China. Why are they doing that? Because they realize China is definitely one of the soon to be the world's largest market. And they want to just create more opportunities for their companies to grow in China. And secondly, our company, I think, is the only one in China so far, has created a government-to-government relationship program, which is basically to encourage SMEs, specifically in the tech area, between China and the rest of the world. So far, we have signed exclusive deals with Italian government, Singapore government, Australian government, and we're working very closely with French government, German government, all in all. So why is that? Because that's exactly as Graham just said, lots of real economic activities actually are happening between SMEs from different countries. And the economy and employment are mostly created by SMEs. SME is actually the same as China and the rest of the world. SME plays a vital role in shaping the economy, plus contributing to the employment in general. I do believe, specifically from the bottom-up approach, there will be more opportunities from both sides to look at each other. Obviously, over the past 30, 40 years, since China opened to the outside world, it has mostly driven by Europe's side. I mean, the big corporates coming to China, SMEs looking for opportunities to sell in China, but we will also see in the next 20, 30 years, there'll be more Chinese SMEs looking for opportunities. There's so many things Chinese companies can learn from Europe's side. I mean, the first multinational company is being created by Dutch, which is the East India Company back in the 17th century. I haven't really seen many multinational Chinese companies yet, because there's a lot of international knowledge, the way to do business, how to set up the different business across different cultures, legislation, tax, different framework. The Chinese have so much to learn from Europe. And recently, I think there's also the biggest news between Europe and China is, I think it's just a couple of months ago, the EU and China signed the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment with a abbreviation called CAI. CAI has been such a big news in China. People have been really talking about it. Why? Because of Trump. The Trump, I mean, obviously, the Trump has been replaced with Biden, but even so, I think there'll be increasingly bumpy journey. Even the Democrats are going to take the position. But the economy relationship between China and the US is definitely going to see relatively more bumpy road ahead. What does that mean? That means opportunities for Europe. Some of my clients, specific like Volkswagen, BMW, Unilever, they are now taking very aggressive measures to grow the China business. Why? Because if the American brands are going to have less market share, like say Procter & Gamble, I mean, Unilever can do more as compared to Procter & Gamble. There's so much thing can be done. So that's for the economic side, for both multinational biggest corporates, but also SMEs. The second point I want to make is on the social side. Environmental protection. The climate change is such an important topic in Europe across the board, from the Western Europe to Eastern Europe, from Northern Europe to Southern Europe. It's really the big deal. But in China, very few people are talking about it. The government side is definitely aware of this. They are taking measures. But we all live in the same world. We're living in the same continent. We're all living in the same earth. The weather is such a big issue. The Chinese people need to be awakened. There needs to be a wake-up call from Europe to push the Chinese to play around the same role and also to make the world a better place. I think Europe can definitely have a lot to teach and to share the knowledge with China to make our world a better place. That's on the social side. Political side, I mean, as Graham said, they might be different cultural concepts. There might be different understanding in dealing with things. But I mean, there's a lot of reasons behind this political system. There's also culture. There's also religion. There's so many reasons behind. Again, I would say in order to be working together, then engagement is 100% more useful and efficient than distant from each other, because ultimately we live in the same world. And as Dr. Christopher later mentioned, then this is China, the US, and the European Union. I mean, ultimately, these three parties are going to shape pretty much the main rule of the game for the whole world in the next 30, 40 years, maybe even longer. So I think in order to create a better world for all of us included, the engagement for me personally is definitely a more efficient and useful way moving forward. So this is it for my statement. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you very much. We've got one question from the audience, from our own Paul Rubik, and he asks, how is IP, I think he means intellectual property development, how is IP development changing relations? Excellent question, because every single company working with us from Europe, the first question they will ask is, okay, what is IP thing? Will Chinese copy my stuff and they basically steal my business from me? Okay, so let me tell you that the fact that it was a history a while ago. I mean, people have been complaining about the so-called copycat, but China, I think, has a while ago pivoted from copy now to copy and innovate, and now to have some of the most innovative stuff on their own. So I do think there's a myriad model existing. So when it comes to intellectual property, I think the government realized very well, which is also very perfectly reflected in the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, CI. IP has to be protected on both sides. So just give me the example of the Facebook. There are a lot of new functions of Facebook, actually. Guess what? They are copying from Tencent. But is that real 100% copy? Not necessarily. They're learning from each other. But when it comes to real intellectual property, I do believe Chinese in general, including the government, including the legislative body, including the law firm, including the associations, needs to pay more attention to that. That's the only way to attract more business coming to China. That's the only way to give confidence to the rest of the world. Chinese are not being seen as copycats, and Chinese can also export innovations to the rest of the world. I think there's still a lot of work can be done, but I definitely see an improving path moving forward from both the government level and the grassroots level. Thank you, Christoph. Do you see it in a similar light, that things are changing with regards to IP and the protection of intellectual property in China, or is this one of the major criticisms that you have?
Certainly, we have to discuss some issues, and we have to discuss it seriously, not with threats, but in a very open manner, in a friendship manner, but with clear goals. If we have a global competition, a free trade, a fair chance for SMEs, we have to have common rules. And when I'm asking and demanding for a G3, that does mean that we have to establish common rules and we have to respect it. Not only to write it down on paper, we have to respect it. But it's much more better than to give threats to each other. Thank you very much also for the stressing of the role of business. Grassrooting was mentioned. Yes, we are those who are connecting people in investments, who is trading with each other, is not fighting against each other. We are stabilizing. Economy is interested in a more peaceful and more cooperative world, and therefore we want to contribute also to the political authorities, and therefore we as Global Chamber Platform make our voice vis-a-vis the G20. But demanding for G3 means that the main pillars of the world, not only economy, but for the responsibility, think at our environment, we have to work on that. And last remark, European Union and China on 31st of December, in the very last moment of the last year, they made an investment agreement. And now should follow a free trade agreement, and we should do it together with the Americans, not to have a dominance of one of the three, but a real partnership. We know the history. We know the problems of China with some parts of the past. We Europeans have a responsibility, but I think we have learned our lesson, and therefore we are able and willing to make a fair agreement between these three. And as I am aware, China is willing and ready to cooperate. And now it's up to us Europeans also to convince United States that to make it together as three is better than to make 2 to 1. That's not the right way in the view of business and economy.
Thank you very much. Anthea, would you like to say anything about IP development and maybe take into account G3, European Union, the US and China? Where will Britain stand?
There's a lot to cover there. I think that the thing that Christoph has to recognize is that the EU is not a country. And in a way, that's where our argument started, because unless you have a United States of Europe, a federal body where you have a government, then you can't be a part of a G3, because in fact, the countries, Germany is one of the largest economies in the world and holds its own in negotiations with other countries. So unless Europe wants to move together and become a United States of Europe, it can't act in the way a government can. And so a G3 is just pie in the sky, in my view, because whereas Germany, France might very well want to come together, if you look at countries like Hungary, Poland, others, any attempt to go further together would actually force other countries to take the Brexit route. So I think it's something you have to be very wary of and very, very careful about. I think there are all sorts of issues to do with fair trade. I represented the ceramic industry while I was representing the West Midlands, which covers Stoke-on-Trent, so on. And one of the big problems for the ceramic industry was the concept of granting market economy status to China, because China isn't a market economy, and allowing floods of ceramics into the EU is very, very damaging for some of the ceramic companies. So I think that the issues around free market economy, and I think IP comes into that, are very challenging. When it comes to trade deals, I think one of the differences of the UK coming out of the EU is that it can make its own trade deals, and it can choose whether or not to have human rights play a larger role. I understand the pragmatic approach of, we do business, it's business to business, it's nothing to do with governments, it's making contact, which I understand, and with my business hat on, I agree. But if you think that by persuading a business, some people in China to change their government, you're in cloud cuckoo land. China is nowhere like the democracies that we have in the West. If we decide that our government is doing the wrong thing, we vote them out next time. China, you don't do that. And if you have any doubt, you just have to look at Hong Kong. And I think that the we as the West and the liberal democracies of the West actually need to stick together and show strength, because I don't think that the Chinese government understand anything other than a show of strength. And we ought to be standing up for human rights, as I mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Anthea. Graham has raised his hand, and then also Christoph.
Yes, so on IP, I mean, IP is an interesting, just returning to the subject of intellectual property. IP historically has been a big issue in China. I think if you went back sort of 20 years ago, I think that European and American and Western governments underestimated this. However, over the last decade, China's emerged as one of the biggest registrants of international patents. And so to some extent, China has turned from, I mean, the English expression poacher turned gamekeeper here, which kind of means it's moved from being a problem country to potentially part of the solution here. The solution being that now China has a vested interest in protecting intellectual property. Why? Because so many of its companies are registering patents. Now, it can be part of the solution, i.e. part of the policing force of international patents. Now's the time to engage with China and say, look, okay, let's put behind the past, but looking forward, we need your help in policing international intellectual property rights, because there will be challenges. Intellectual property remains a problem in large parts of the world, but it's Chinese patents that need defending as much as American patents and European patents and British patents. So again, I would suggest that they've moved from poacher to gamekeeper in that, if you pardon the expression, and if that I hope that's an expression that translates. Perhaps there's
I'm sure it does. Christoph, you wanted to say something.
I would, Graham, I would completely agree, because the day is not far away. Then China is looking for intellectual property shelter against others, which are trying to use this intellectual property, because 50% of all worldwide patents are from China. And therefore, they are on the way of innovation. And I think that's good for the progress of innovation and therefore also products and services around the world. But to Anthea, on the one hand, you are right, European Union is not a state like United States or China, but is it member of the G20, yes or no? Yes, it is. And why? Because it has some competencies delivered from the members, and one of the competence is to make free trade agreements. And that's a core competence, and I would be very, very pleased if also United Kingdom is joining European Union in these foreign trade agreements, because it's much more better to have the weight of European Union at the side as to be alone. You see it in many, many questions, India and Australia, and that this way would be better for UK, for the SMEs in UK, and also for the spirit of the European family.
Georgios has raised his hand.
I think that we have to follow a step-by-step approach. First, we have to exploit the new environment, because I believe that Biden will offer us a lot of opportunities, not necessarily to solve the problems, but to discuss and negotiate about the problems. Because with Trump, we had major problems in the sense that the United States was not participating in the effort to safeguard the environment. The United States was not participating in the World World Health Organization. So this was a major break with the past. Now we have to renegotiate. Of course, we cannot follow a strategy of equal distancing between China and the United States, because the United States we are allied to the United States. There are a lot of common objectives and similarities in our political system, in our culture. This does not mean that we have to follow a containment policy against China. But if we want to count in the modern world, and even we have to move towards the so-called G3, and of course we have a long way to go, we have to start with a new relationship with the United States, more productive. And of course, there are huge imbalances. We have the trade imbalance between China and the European Union. We also have a huge imbalance in the trade between China and the United States. Despite Trump's efforts, the trade deficit remained. He was not able to reduce the trade deficit of the United States with China. And also have a huge trade surplus, European trade surplus, especially German trade surplus, vis-a-vis the United States. So it's a very complicated situation, and the Americans, our American friends and allies, will ask us if we want to upgrade our collaboration. We'll have to start by increasing our defense expenditure and by reducing our trade surplus. We cannot avoid this discussion. On the other hand, we have to insist as Europeans that something has to be done with the digital supremacy of American companies in the European market and their tax avoiding habits. So I think that we have to start with renegotiating a more productive relationship with the United States, and then start addressing problems and issues with China in a constructive way. We cannot compete with China by, let's say, imposing protectionist rules. This is outdated and it's against our mentality, but we have to compete with China by making bigger investments and becoming more efficient. This is the only way to go.
Thank you, Georgios. There are a number of other questions from the attendees. I would like to ask you, our panel. Stephanie, can you raise the first question, please?
Is there a solution for a faster and secure 5G rollout in Europe, for example?
So 5G rollout in Europe.
Okay, my question is why we have on the one hand a Chinese company, on the other hand an American company, and we are in between like a sandwich. Why not a European innovation? We have Horizon Europe. Why cannot we develop 6G things like we are in innovation just now, information of today, a new battery strategy out from Europe, or hydrogen cars out from Europe? Why cannot we be initiative and not wait for others, but to cooperate with others? That's my access to this question.
I'll talk, of course, as a politician, because I'm a politician. I can tell you that one of the problems the European Union has is that we talk about everything, but we don't act about everything. There is a lot of European criticism concerning the Chinese and 5G. For instance, we claim that they have, in order to develop the 5G technology, they were subsidized in the range of $100 billion by different methods by the Chinese government. Okay, that was in the past. Now, Chinese companies are so advanced that they can compete in the global market, and they are more powerful and efficient than European companies in the digital sector. That means that if we want to catch up with the Chinese, we cannot leave it to the market forces because they cannot solve the problem. There has to be European and state intervention in favor of major digital companies so that they can catch up with the Chinese and the Americans. But, you know, we talk about space, we talk about European defense initiatives, we talk about digital economy, we talk about green transition, and the European budget is stuck at the level of 1% of the GDP of the 27 member states. The British left through Brexit, but the British mentality according to which if you spend the money at the European level is lost money for the taxpayer at the national level, still triumphs.
Thank you, Georgios. There's one other question I would like to raise, and that is onshoring, the removal or the repatriation of certain production capabilities that were outshored to China, to Europe, something that in light of the corona crisis we know about supply chain problems. Is that something that is becoming much more current now?
I can talk about that, Tom. So in terms of onshoring, just to go back a little bit as well to the 5G comment, I think that there's definitely a strategic imperative that we've seen in the last couple of years, not least because of COVID, for certain industries to be required to be onshored. I think that there's a general belief that certain industries need to be within the competence of a country. I mean, we're seeing that with the vaccines debate and all sorts of things. So that aside, I think when it comes to 5G, I think we need to take more advice from security partners. But I'm sure that there are elements that the Chinese can help with on 5G network. Remember that because they have a very urban population and a very large population, they've got unique advantages in developing 5G infrastructure that we can certainly learn from or partner from, subject to security. When it comes to reshoring, yes, we've seen a bit of reshoring. Obviously, a lot of that happens with currency movements, with people's the increased belief, certainly in Britain, but I think also in Europe, to buy more locally. I think in Britain, we're seeing people that are prepared to pay more to buy locally. I think it goes back to the opportunity of understanding the trade imbalance between China and Europe. There will be opportunities to onshore. And there will be opportunities to interconnect our economies more. The opportunity is balancing that trade up a little bit more, working with Chinese firms to onshore into Europe, as well as helping our firms to be competitive and potentially for strategic industries to be brought back.
What do you as an entrepreneur in China would like to see from the European partners in terms of legislation, in terms of stimulating trade and maximizing opportunities?
Well, I mean, again, I'm a private company, and I can't really say from a regulator's point of view, but I think the CAI has pretty much outlined very clearly of some of the basic framework. So when it comes to grassroots, again, I'm not sure if I'm the perfect person to answer that question.
I just wanted to come back on the reshoring question, because reshoring has been going on for a number of years, as I think people find that the short lead time, I mean, it's so much easier to ring up a company down the road to get your widgets than to email China and wait for 10 weeks for them to come on a boat. So I think that whole way manufacturing has moved much more to the sort of just-in-time way of doing things, started a real trend of reshoring. But there are other things contributing. One is the increased automation in the UK, which is what I know more about the UK than other places. So that has taken cost out of production. And rising labour costs in places like China and India. So they're not as competitive as perhaps they were. But I think what has really happened with Brexit, not just with Brexit, that's another question, but what has really happened with the COVID situation is the realization we need to diversify the supply. It's no good having all your eggs in one basket. You need to have a flexibility, and you need smaller companies that can be more agile and meet the ever-changing needs. And so that's where I think the reshoring has maybe changed a bit. And that's how it's developing. I can see Graham nodding, so I'll let him come in.
Thank you. Graham, would you like to respond to Anthea's point and also Juwei's point? And then the time is moving quickly. Then I would suggest we do one last round of statements and finish the call in the next 10 minutes.
I'll be very quick. I agree with everything Anthea said. Just to add a few comments upon your question about regulators and regulation. I think that there's an important East meets West point here in the way that these cooperation agreements are viewed in the domestic economies. I think in the West, we tend to view cooperation agreements as a destination, right? We've got to this destination, trade must flourish from here. Whereas I think in the East, and I certainly include China in this, they tend to see it more as a stop on a journey of getting somewhere. And I think whenever I speak to politicians in Europe and in Asia, the perception of the same agreement being slightly different, it always strikes me, and I think that we've got to understand that in the West, that the Chinese regulators will view this as one stop on a journey of partnership. And I think if we get into that mentality a little bit more, that we should work together over a period of time, rather than necessarily get to the one perfect agreement where all of our issues will be addressed and we can sit back and do nothing for eternity. That's not going to happen. We need to recognize that cooperation is, even through regulation, is a journey, not a destination.
Thank you, Graham. Juwei, would you like to make a closing statement?
It's fascinating for me as a private entrepreneur to hear from the European Union. I mean, apparently we are from different perspectives about some of the interesting points you made, but all in all, I mean, I just would like to repeat again, there will be differences, there will be different ways of doing things, but there will be more benefits than distant from each other. And as Deng Xiaoping repeatedly said, and as the late the country head who started the open reform, preserving the differences while seeking harmony. I think that's just more sustainable and healthy way of doing things and create a better world moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christoph.
Yes, just to give some answers. Georgios, you mentioned fair taxation. Yes, fair taxation, but that who is a stakeholder in fair taxation? G3 could make an initiative for that. Today, Europeans are complaining against Americans and vice versa. We should do it. Yes, you're right. SMEs need urgently fair taxation. And we should not only the big companies see which are avoiding tax payments. We should see the many small and medium-sized companies which are affording taxes and affording social securities. And that's what we have to keep in mind also if we are discussing the changes in the world. Second, the offshore question. Yes, I think we should have an industrial strategy. European Commission is working on that. And giving some priorities, what should we have in Europe? Let's say last experience was the healthcare sector. We are dependent from others. International cooperation is okay, but to be dependent, it's not okay. And therefore, we have to define our strategy and also for SMEs to be integrated and have the frame conditions that not only the cheapest offer, but the best offer. And independence is also part of a best offering we should keep in mind. Yes, and last one, first of all, CCPID. I don't know if Jeal has access to CCPID, but the G3 idea should come also from China, not only from Europe, because now we have running waters, and now things are inflowing. And now we have some opportunities also with the new administration in the United States to bring in ideas, to form minds. And that's an incredible opportunity for us, and we should not leave the situation. So, and really last remark, SME Union, SME around world. Yes, we should raise our voice. Please integrate yourself. And in my capacity of Global Chamber platform, but also Euro Chamber president, I'm inviting you wherever you need a cooperation. I'm very in favor to do my best. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. Georgios, would you like to make some final remarks?
Well, taxation is a good example that it shows us that we have to follow a step-by-step approach. I took part in different committees for taxation matters after the Panama Papers, etc. And I found out the following, that taxation, there is no common tax policy in the European Union. Taxation is considered a national prerogative, and there is tax competition between member states. As far as the American digital corporations are concerned and the taxation in the European Union, we Europeans are not united even in these matters. And our hope now is that the matter will be resolved at the level of the OECD without being sure that this will happen. So there are practical issues, and we have to move step by step. First, we have to deal with the COVID crisis because our Chinese friends and competitors are in the post-COVID era or almost in the post-COVID era because they still have some problems. But unfortunately, we are in the COVID era. So we have to deal with the issue, leave the COVID crisis behind us so that we can develop our economy, because otherwise we won't be effective. Then we have to improve our relationship with the United States of America. and then we have to strengthen our European resolve, and then we have to make a better deal with our Chinese friends and competitors. We admire the Chinese for their achievements, and in Greece they are very popular in the sense that we feel close to the Chinese people, and we have a lot of common interests. For instance, Greek shipping tycoons collaborate with the Chinese. Of course, the Chinese develop their own tycoons. Yes, they don't leave anything to chance. But I think we should welcome the Chinese progress, and the new world is completely different. The world during the Biden presidency is completely different from the world during the Obama presidency. And one of the basic differences is the strengthening of China. China actually is the second economic and political superpower. And we have to make our calculations based on the new reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgios. Graham.
Just a very quick closing remarks. First of all, you'll forgive me for not commenting on the politics of the European Union. That feels above my pay grade. But getting beyond the headlines and talking about the detail, I think this discussion today is really important. We need to see and do more of it. China, as an economic player, or as a major player on the top table of the economic top table, is a reality now. With that, there's full of opportunities. And as I say, I would just, in summary, just urge everyone to not lose sight of building those bilateral grassroots connections. And what I would say is hopefully that would inform the decisions that you're taking. Are they helping or hindering building those bilateral grassroots connections between our economies and our people?
Thank you, Graham. Anthea?
Thank you. Just very short few remarks. I have to come back on the G3, G20. I think if you can persuade France and Germany and Italy that they should not be part of the G20, that the European Union should represent them, then you might be able to move on to the G3. But until that point, it won't work. It's been a fascinating discussion today. And I think for me, I really want to say trade, yes, trade is hugely important, but not trade at any price. And with my political hat on, I have to say that I think that the countries around the world need to stand up for human rights and call it out and not allow another genocide to go unnoticed and just allowed to happen. We've done it before and we must never, ever do it again. But having said that, there is a lot of progress that can be made, and I look forward to seeing the world trade grow and adapt to this post-COVID world. And I think the next few years are going to be very interesting. And a final remark to all the UK participants, the attendees today, do please get in touch and join SME Connect in the UK. I think that it was an organisation that can really help develop trade, not only with the EU, but around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes today's session. Thank you very much to all of our experts in the panel. Thank you very much to all of our attendees. I'm sorry that we couldn't answer all of the questions that were raised, but we tried to get the most important ones discussed. Please visit smeconnect.eu, our homepage, and also this recording will be put on YouTube if you would like to rewatch it. So thank you very much to everyone. Please stay safe and best of luck.